Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we masech the Avodah Zarah daf Mem Tes. We are going to begin in the middle of Mem Ches Amud Beis by the last Mishnah. Says the Masnisin, Zaynim tachtei Yerakos b'mosek Geshamim avuloi b'mosachama. So as we saw in yesterday's daf, this has been discussing the dinim of an asherah, of a tree which is for Avodah Zarah. So we say that you can plant vegetables underneath these types of trees, but only in the rainy season and not in the summer season. Says Rashi, why is allowed during the rainy season? Sha'ilan gamhu kashalahem, because it's actually not good for them. Shema'akiv hachama milavoi, because it's preventing the sun from coming, because the Yomosei Geshamim, there's not as much sun, and therefore the fact that it's under shade of this tree is not good for it. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with planting there because you're not really getting hana. But not during the sunny season because sail is yafalahen. It's so sunny, so therefore, because of that, shade is good for the vegetables. And therefore, you cannot plant there. Okay. And then the Mishnah says, the hachzirin, when it comes to like chazeres, like lettuce, lo bimos hachama, so lettuce is something that you're never allowed to plant there because shade is always good for lettuce, even in the rainy season, and therefore you can never plant that. Rabbi Yosi actually, Rabbi Yosi says you cannot even plant vegetables even during the rainy season, in which, as we said, it is allowed. So as we said, during the Yomosei Geshamim, you're allowed to plant there because the shade is not good for them. But therefore, the shade is really mutter. However, there's also the during the season, like in autumn, the leaves are going to fall off, and it's going to serve as fertilizer for the vegetables. So this is a problem, and therefore it's usher. Now remember, Rabbi Yosi suffers zevazeh gorim usher rabbanan amri zevazeh gorim mutter. This is a case of zevazeh gorim. What caused these vegetables to grow? So there's two things. One is, says Rashi, navia, the foliage, which is usher because it's connected to the tree. However, the karka oilam heter, it's planted in the earth. The other thing which is causing these vegetables to grow is the earth itself, which is not usher. So garmin liraka shigdlu. So in this case, even though it's true that the vegetables are getting most of its nutrients from the ground and there by itself, but now that you have some foliage landing on it, so they're both causing the vegetables to grow. So this is the case of zevaz and garim, and maybe this is the whole machlokas, whether or not that's allowed. So it must be that that's the whole machlokas. We actually saw the exact opposite when it comes to dinim of zevaz and garim. Did not, because we learned previously. Rabbi Yosi Omer Shaychik v'Zarah l'Ruach Umat l'Yam. So, if let's say you have Avodah Zarah, you could grind up the Avodah Zarah, and that's it. You can throw into the wind or into the sea. Basically, it can be fertilizer. And the question is this considered to be an issue? So, according to Rabbi Yosi, we apparently see Rabbi Yosi is more lenient and allows this. So, I'm like, Avhi Nasa Zevel. No, this is considered to be zevel, fertilizer. So apparently, Rabbi Yosi, the other sheet of the Rabbanan, are saying zevazeh garim is aser, and Rabbi Yosi apparently doesn't have so much of an issue with it. But never yidbak biyadcha me'uma minacherem. So kash Rabbanan, kash Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yosi. So we see when it comes to Avodah Zarah, Rabbi Yosi holds zevazeh garim is aser. Yet when it comes to over here, it's mutter. Now bish Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yosi l'kasha. Hasam de kazol leibud. Over here, you're grinding up the Avodah Zarah. You're getting rid of the Avodah Zarah, and therefore, because of that matter, that's the reason why he's lenient as there's no Avodah Zarah there. at all as it's being ground up. So therefore, zev zegarim will be mutter. However, these foliage, these leaves are now leibud. They're fertilizer, and therefore that's considered to be aser. So maybe within Avodah Zarah itself, we could be machal. When do we say zev zegarim is mutter aser? Kind of Rabbi Yosi. Oh, the Rabbanan kasha. So Ipach, you have to flip them around. The Imois Emelul Tepach. The Rabbi Yosi Kiddushanina. Let's keep everything the way it is. Rabbi Yosi, we gave it a teretz. The Rabbanan Kiddi Omer Rav Mari Bereda Rav Kahana. So why over here does he say Zevigarim is Aser, but our Mishnah it's not a problem? So he says Mashbiach Ba'or Poigim B'Basar. So he says, and we'll see this in a second in Rashi, that whatever is the profits of the hide is lost by the meat. So hachinami mashesh biach b'navia, the gain of the foliage landing on this poigim b'tseil, it gets lost out. Basically, the idea is that zevizegarim could be a problem, but over here, when it comes to the foliage landing on the ground, the fact that you planted the vegetables in the shade, so the shade of Avodah Zarah is detrimental for the vegetables. Even though the tree also provided some benefit by the foliage, they basically cancel each other out, and that's the reason why they're lenient. Now, what does this have to do with the other case? So it says, says Rashi, Gama ein margilin b'psulei hamikdashim, that you can't skin by the feet anything which is psulei mikdashim, lahafshit derech haragolim. The normal way of skinning an animal, you're not allowed to do it by psulei mikdashim. Says Rashi, v'afal pi sha'or nimcha b'yoiker, even though it's true you could sell the hides for more, also hargil, you can't do it, lafi shebezayin kachimhu shemekalkel habasar, because you're being mekalkel the basars, even though the org is more valuable, but the basar becomes less valuable. So that's the idea behind that. Okay. So basically, they cancel each other out, is what the idea is. So over here, cancels each other out, and that's the reason why the Rabbanan are lenient when it comes to our Mishnah, that a person is allowed to plant vegetables, be mostly shamim, and we're not concerned of the navia of the foliage that falls onto it. Okay. Hachinami masheshpiach v'navia poigim b'tseil. V'sav Rabbi Yosi zev zegarim aser. Is it true that Rabbi Yosi always holds zev zegarim is aser by Avodah Zarah? But we were just lenient only when it's also ibud. Otherwise, it's aser. V'sav Rabbi Yosi zev zegarim aser. V'san Rabbi Yosi Omer noitin. So we learn. It says. In Masechtas Arla, noitin yocher shel arla. Now, a person can plant the branches of an arla tree. Now, an arla, the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat its fruit. You can't get benefit from it. However, we allow you to plant its branches. However, a noitin egois, but not its actual fruit, shel arla. Nemneshahu pri, because the egois, the nut, is a pri. Rabbi Behud Amarav, Moide Rabbi Yosi, even though Rabbi Yosi says the stringency, he is allowing Shim Nata v'hivrach v'hirkav mutter, that if you did plant the nut and you grafted it, then it's mutter, because it's a case of zev zegairim, and that's the reason why it's not going to be the nut will be lenient. Says Rashi, nut ha'egoi shel arla mutter. So if you plant the nut, it's mutter. Alma ki gadol ilon. When the tree grows, the toin paris, and it produces fruits, havilhu hanach paris be grama de egois, the iser v'karka de heter v'katani mutter. This is the case of zev zegarim. The egois is aser, the earth is mutter, and yet we see Rabbi Yosi holds zev zegarim is mutter. So again, it's mutter to plant a cutting from an arla tree, and its fruits are mutter immediately, because the wood of the tree is not forbidden as arla. That's what we're saying. That's why it's mutter right away, because it's just the wood. And the wood of the tree is not forbidden. But it's also to plant a nut of arla because it itself is arla. But again, if you would do so, then it's a case of zevazeg goyrim, that you could eat its aftergrowth. But Tani Nami Hachi, Mighty Rabbi Yosef, we continue to Mem Tesla Aleph, Shim not the Behivrach Behirkav Mutter. So this again is a case of Zevazeg Garim is Mutter. So Rahaka Rabbi Yosef says Zevazeg Garim is Aser. The Chitema Shanale Rabbi Yosef ben Shar Suan Levos Kachavim. Maybe when it comes to Avodah Zarah, we're very strict. Rabbi Yosef holds Zevazeg Garim in normal other circumstances, for example, like by Arla, the din is Zevazeg Garim is Mutter. However, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, we're strict. So Mishani Law, does he make a distinction between these situations of Asanya? We learn like this: Sada sheniz davla bezevel. Let's say you have a field which was fertilized with fertilizer, but it was fertilizer of avodas kachavim. So first of all, it tells us clearly this is one case of Avodah Zarah. So that's a case of Zevazeg Mutter, Zevazeg Gairim, and it's referring to Avodah Zarah. So too, Para Shinis Patma be Karshini Vesachavim. Let's say you have a cow that was fattened up by food of Avodah Zarah. So Tanichada Sada Tizra, you can plant with a field or Para Tishri, you can shech the cow. The Tani Idach Sada Tavor, you have to lay the field has to lay fallow. Uparo tirza, and the cow has to basically become lean again, has to thin out. So my love. So which one is it? So my love, Rabbi Yosef Rabbanan. It must be it's based on the machlokas Rabbi Yosef Rabbanan. Because again, this is a case of Zevazeg Goyrim. You have a cow that even if you're feeding Avodah Zarah, but it's not the only thing it's eating. So therefore, the Avodah Zarah food and mutter food together makes this animal what it is. Or the earth is mutter, and the Avodah Zarah connected to it, this fertilizer is also Zevazeg Goyrim is mutter, or is it aser? So Rabbanan we know is more strict. Pardon me. Rav Yossi holds Zevazeg Goyrim. Is apparently must be the one who holds that that's the din, because the Rabban will say it's aser, and Rav Yosef will say Zevazeg Garim mutter, because we already established by our law that that's what he holds, that Zevazeg Garim is mutter. So probably we'd want to say the same thing, because we hold clearly, again by our law, that Zevazeg Garim mutter can Rav Yosef. So how else could we establish Avodah Zarah? It must be that he really holds Zevazeg Garim is mutter even when it comes to Avodah Zarah. So then we're, of course, back to our question. So we say no. Well, Rebbe Lezer, Rabbanan. The truth is, Rebbe Lezer, according to Rabbi Yossi, he could make a distinction of Zevazeg Garim by other things like Arla, that Zevazeg Garim will be mutter, but he'll be more strict when it comes to Avodah Zarah. Zevazeg Garim is aser. However, Rebbe Lezer will say it's always mutter, even by Avodah Zarah. So, hi Rebbe Lezer Rabbanan. Where do we see that? Machlokas Elam Rebbe Lezer Rabbanan. Or maybe it's referring to the machlokas between Rebbe Lezer and Rabbanan regarding sourdough. So, if that's the case, let's just look at Rashi first. Ha Rebbe Lezer Rabbanan. Al Rav Yossi be'avodas hachavim zevazeg garim aser. Severely kedetani masnisen. V'imishum shaychik v'zayra. So we already answered that as well. It's because it's le'ibud. So he may be lenient over there. Yimishum arla, so shanali ben chachavim shari surin. When it comes to Rabbi Yossi holds, again, he'll hold Zevazeg Garim is mutter shari surin. It's only by Avodah Zarah it's aser. Unless it's le'ibud, then it's mutter. So what exactly is this case of sourdough? Not. Soor shel chulin. Let's say you have sourdough, which is of chulin, b'shel truma, and it's also of truma. Shenaflo toicha isa. And it fell into a dough. So therefore, this is a case of Zevazeg Garim. You have chulin and truma mixed in together. Neither of them have the capacity on their own to make this bread rise. So v'nisrafu the chimtzu. However, together it has the capacity to do so. So Belezer Omer, it depends. I always go after the thing that fell in last. So therefore, says Rashi, so if the chulin sourdough fell in last, Bittul Asarishon, then the truma is batal, umutul azarm, and therefore you can eat it. However, if the truma fell in last, then it will be asal azarm. So it depends on whatever was last. Chachamim omrim bein shenafel iser l'chatchil, bein shenafel iser l'basayif, einu oiser ad shehebo kedei chametz. That doesn't make a difference which one fell first. It has to be enough to be able to cause the fermentation process. And since it didn't have the capacity to do so, it's going to be mutter. The Yomer Abaye, focusing on Abaye. Abaye says, Lo shanu, the only time that Rabbi Lezer says that we only go after the last one is El Shekadim Tzilik as a Isser, is before the Isser was taken out. Now the Truma was taken out first. So the Truma fell in, then the Truma was taken out, and then the Chulin fell in, then it'll be Mutal Azarm. Of a Loi Kadim Tzilik as a Isser, Aser. However, even though the Chulin came in last, however, if the Truma remained there, it's still going to be Aser. Says Rashi, Kaidim Nafil Shilzet, that before the Chulin fell in, the Truma was taken out. Shekashanafel Zeh, Lekel Memer, Hetem and Starfel Isser, Yoshir Aser. We can't say, as we mentioned before, the whole notion of Hetem and Starfel Isser, because the Isser was already taken out. Says Rashi, Aval im loikanim silkas archan aser shavalbi shenafel hetel b'saif. Even though the chulin fell in afterwards, aser. The zevazeg garim aser must be because it holds the fact that the chulin and the truma are together. That's zevazeg garim, and it's aser. And rabbanan zevazeg garim mutter. So this is how we'll see the machlokas, and we see that this is b'shari surin. And we see that there's a machlokas by that. So, Mamai, the time Rabbi Lezer, Kidabaye, how do we know that Rabbi Lezer is going like the sheet of Abaye that he holds of Zeved Gorim is Aser? Dilma time Rabbi Lezer Mishum Dachar Nachar Nanibah. Maybe he always just says you go after the last one. It doesn't make any difference, unlike what Abaye says, distinguishing only if the stuff was taken out. Not like what Abaye qualified, it would still be mutter even if the truma wasn't taken out. Now, gomer be isura, asura. If you finish with isur, that's also. If you gomer behater mutarin. If the truma fell in first and then the chulin, that'll be mutter. Bein salke, bein lo salke, whether the truma was taken out or not. So, how do we know we have to necessarily qualify it like Abaye's opinion? Rather, perhaps we're going to instead say the machlokas is based on Rabbi Lezer and Rabbanan. Again, the whole purpose of doing this is freeing up Rabbi Yossi's shita, so he'll be able to make a distinction instead of Zegar Mutter or Aser regarding Shari Surim and Avodah Zarah. So what's the din when it comes to Eitzim? They're not, as we're going to see soon. Not Lumenu Eitzim. So let's say in an oven wood fell in, Asur B'Hana, because this is from an Asherah tree. You can't get hana from this wood. Let's say hisikba as hatana. Let's say you turn up the oven and start burning. So if it's a chadash, if it's a brand new oven, you have to break the oven, because what happens in the very first time, the heating of the oven strengthens it, and therefore that's something in which only happens the first time an oven is used, and therefore if it was heated initially with wood from Avodah Zarah, you can never use that oven, so it has to be broken. However, if it's yashin, if it's an old oven, so therefore it's already been hardened, then all you have to do is yutzan. You only have to do is wait until the oven gets cold, so therefore the wood of the Avodah Zarah served no benefit. Now that you afterwards use, let's say, other proper wood, then it's fine. Okay. Then the Mishnah over there says, we're going to see soon in the next Amud, Afabos Hapas, let's say you baked bread with the branches of a shera. So what's the din of this bread? So Asur B'Hana. We say that it is Asur B'Hana. Now over here, this is also we're going to establish this as a case of Zevazagar. Now Rashi says, Bein B'Chadash Shitsanu V'Chaz V'Siku, whether we're talking about a new oven that you cooled it off and then you heated it up, heter bein biyashin behesek shel atzei shera iser havle beturvayu zevazagarim. So it's a case of zevazagarim. So let's just keep it simple. The oven itself is mutter, and then the wood is aser, or you put other mutter wood together with the aser wood. So therefore, it's a case of zevazagarim. So what does the Mishnah say over there? It says asura. So our Mishnah subahana. Clearly, our Mishnah holds over there that why is the bread aser? Because Zevaz Garim is Aser. This Arva Bacherim gets all mixed up. Kul Masuros Bahana. It's still Aser. Rabbi Lezer Omer, and here's the sheet of Rabbi Lezer. So that's Zevaz Garim is Aser. Rabbi Lezer Omer Yoch Hanol Yamamelch. What you can do is you could take the Hana and throw it into the Yamamelch. In other words, what you could do, says Rashi, so v'katani hapasa suro Rabbi Lezer at shech hani demei eitzim de Israel Yamamelch. So whatever the value of it was, that should be thrown into the Yamamelch. So we see that Rabbi Lezer over here holds clear from our Mishnah that Zevaz Gairim is Aser. Says Rashi, Alma Zevaz Gairim Aser, because it has to be thrown Yamamelch. So that is that's Rebbe Lezer. So they're even more strict. And they say, no, you can't like redeem and figure out the difference, and therefore that then you could still use it. No, you can't be paid about chachavim. So the whole thing is you have to throw the bread itself. So Rabbanan depagla Rebbe Lezer maninhu. So the Rabbanan who argue with Rebbe Lezer, who is it that matters for Avodah Zarah? So this clearly see Rebbe Lezer is strict by Zevaz Garim. Ilu Rabbanan de Eitzim. So if you want to tell me the case of the wood, Achmori Machamri, they gave even more strict, right? They said that when it comes to the wood, you can't even be paid it onto money, and throw the money into the Yamamelch. No, you can't even do that. So they also hold Zevaz Garim Aser in that the Mishnah upcoming. El Rabbanan de Saor. Maybe, again, Rebbe Lezer of the Mishnah upcoming shows Zevaz Garim is Aser, and the Rabbanan regarding the sourdough, where you have the chulin and the truma mixed together. So we said, so maybe again it's where the din is different. So Avodah Shabbos Rabbanan de Mekila b'Saor. Maybe the Rabbanan are only make when it comes to the sourdough, by the chulin and truma mixed together. There's a chavim mi mekili, but they're not meko when it comes to Avodah Zarah. El oilam harav Yosef Rabbanan. So again, the kasha is, how could we say one is like Rabbi Lezer, one's like the Rabbanan, right? We see clearly that they're all strict of Zevaz Garim Aser. So all we have is Rav Yossi, where we do find, at least when it comes to our law, that he's meko when it comes to planting of the egois, that Zevaz Garim is mutter. So maybe, we want to establish, therefore, Rabbi Lezer as the opinion, who's the lenient opinion. But then, how do we understand our Mishnah that he holds Zevaz Garim is Aser? So we said, must be because we make a distinction between Shar Surin and Avodah Zarah. The truth is, our Mishnah, really, he's lenient. He always holds Zevaz Garim is mutter, even when it comes to Avodah Zarah. However, how do we understand our Mishnah? So Rav Yosef ben Rabbanan Amru. So Ladidi Zevaz Garim mutter. So when it comes to the foliage, I don't care, because even if it would happen, I'd hold it to be mutter. Ladidhu Diamrisu Zevaz Garim Aser. But according to you, that holds Zevaz Garim is Aser. So then ideally mias, you should agree. Af Yerokas Milosik Shalmim. The Yerokas Milosik Shalmim. Rabbanan Kidi Aimer Rav Mari Berei de Rav Kahana. So they permit it, since the vegetables are also negatively affected because of the shade, as there's no sun can come on that part of the tree. So he said, as we said before, that because maybe the only time it's a problem is if it's mamish getting hana. But however, even the foliage is beneficial, but the shade is like canceling it out, and therefore that's the reason why they're lenient in that case. However, according to Rabbi Yossi, he wouldn't have a problem because he holds Zevaz Garim mutter. But according to the Rabbanan, who holds Zevaz Garim asu, the foliage should be a problem. But they said it's not a problem in that situation, because during that time they cancel each other out. Question 3. Because of the foliage, and the Gemara said, with the Vram de Rabban Kamra, the Dilu Shari. So Madua Lishi Tasso Mutter. Why does he hold its mutter? Because Rabbi Yotzi holds Zevaz Garim is mutter, or Rabbanan holds Zevaz Garim Aser. Over here it's going to be mutter Mishum Damash Mishbiach B'Navia Poigim B'Tzeil. The tzeil will cancel out because of the it's detrimental. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So now the Gemara talks about Hahu Ginta, that there was a particular garden. And let's just look at this Rashi first. El oilam haditani sada tizra Rav Yosi. So again, we established Rav Yosi holds by Arlet's mutter because he holds Zevzeh Germ's mutter. And by Avodah Zarah, when it comes to grinding it up and throwing it to the wind, he actually does not make a distinction between that and other Isurim. And it's not like we said before, it's because it's the Ozal Ibud, because even if it's not Ozal Ibud, he'll hold his mutter because he holds the Zevzeh Germ is mutter. Okay. But again, the halachas of Rabbi Yosi, look at this last Rashi on this Amud, the Zevzeh Germ mutter. Okay, now let's go back. Hahu Ginta, there was this garden. There is Davil Bezavadav that was used as fertilizer for the Zarah. So Sholach Rav Amram committed Rabbi Yosi, Amalei Hacha Yama Rabbi Huda Shmuel Halach Rabbi Yosi. It's not a problem because that was a Germ mutter. Okay. As we continue to Mem Tesam and Beis, let's see the next Mishnah. Notul Mimena Eitzim. So we already saw this whole Mishnah, but nonetheless we'll go through it again, obviously. So let's say in this oven is thrown Avodah Zarah wood, came from an Asherah tree. So Asurin Bahana. Obviously, it's also Bahana. Hisik ben Satana. Let's say you fired up the oven with it. So Im Chadash Yutats, as we said. If it's a new oven, you gotta smash the oven because it hardened up, and therefore it's always going to have been benefited from Avodah Zarah. Im Yashav, it's an older oven, so all it is just the heat of the wood. Yutzan cooled off, and then afterwards you can use it. Now, Avamos Hapas. Let's say you bake bread in this oven, and let's say it was a mixture, or again, it was an old oven, so Zevzeh Garim. So we see over here, Asur Bahana. We see according to the Rabbanan, they hold it's Asur Bahana because it's Zevzeh Garim is Asur. And this Arvi Bacher is called Asuros Bahana. There's a mixture, it's still Asur, it's not bottle. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Yochanan Yam Melech. Rabbi Lezer is a little bit more lenient. Apparently, he holds Zevzeh Garim, and when it comes to Avodah Zarah, Yochanan Yam Melech. And this is not necessarily a raya that Zevzeh Garim is mutter according to him, is usher according to him. It's mutter, but it's talking about the Avodah Zarah itself. So therefore, you have to throw it into the Yam Melech, but you can throw the money of the value of the bread. So Amrulo in Pinel V'Schachavim. So no, you can't even do that. And then the Mishnah continues another situation. Natul himenu karker. Let's say a person takes like a piece of wood or a pick, to pick his teeth. Also, bahana. You can't do that. You can't take wood from an Avodah Zarah tree. Arig bos habeged. Let's say you used it in order to weave a garment. So also bahana. That garment is also bahana. Nisar bacherim kul nasuro soon bahana. It's always going to be aser, even though it's mixed in with many things. It's never going to be bato. But Lezer Omer yochan olam melech. So Omer lo in pidul v'tzchavim. So the question is, why do we almost have the exact same situations talking about firewood and bread, and also a garment, utzricha. So the Gemara starts off by saying that both of these cases are needed. Yashmin and Kamaisa. If you have the case of the bread in the oven, so B'hakam Rebbe Lezer, maybe only in that situation would Rebbe Lezer say that you could be Yoyachano Yam Hamelach, Nishum Debe'inna de Kagam Pas, because when the bread was completed up, Kali Leisura, the Isser, the firewood is all burnt up. So maybe we're more lenient when it comes to bread that you can actually do this, says Rashi. Bishum Deloy Minkra be Isser Mamish. You can't actually see the Isser. The Isser is gone already. Of a karker, when it comes to using it to weave, the Isser Isser Be'ene, the Isser is still there, a Mamadu Rabbanan, that you can't do that. The Iashmin and the karker, Bahakam Rabbanan, maybe only there the Rabbanan are strict, of a pas, a Mamadu Rebbe Lezer, Sricha, maybe in that case they're lenient. Rav Chia Beredo Rabba, Bar Nachmeni Rav Chista. So Amr is Iri Halach Rebbe Lezer. The Halach in fact is like Rebbe Lezer that we're lenient and we say Yochanol Yam Melech. Ikad Yarmi, some say the Amr Rav Chista, Amr Liabo Bar Rav Chista, Haki Amr is Iri Halach Rebbe Lezer. In fact, that is the halacha. Amr Rav Adabarava Lo Shanu. The only time we say this is El Pas, only when it comes to bread. Of a chavi is low. When it talking about yain nesach, so in that situation, not, says Rashi. So when it comes to a barrel of yain nesach, shenis arva b'chaviyai shel heter, and it was mixed up with other barrels, but they were kosher wine. So kuan asuras bahana. We say they're all as bahana. The ain latakana, there's no remedy. That even Rebbe Lezer would not allow you to take the value of the yain nesach and throw it into the Yam Melech lahater limchar kol chavias levada, to be able to sell the actual wine. Oh, hashaykis mehen l'chamarim of chachamim mishum deisa isur be'enei. So the wine is still there, its extent, and therefore because of that, we're going to be more strict when it comes to yain nesach. So that Rebbe Lezer will not allow that. So again, it's interesting. So then, why do we differentiate, as we just saw in the tzricha, between that and the karker and the bread, right? So the karker is here, but nonetheless, he still says that yochiyam amelch. But for some reason, when it comes to chavi, it's not. No, when it comes to the chavi, it's mutter. It's similar to what we just saw in our Gemara. Okay, and we'll fine. So Tahu Gavra, there was a situation of a person, this arivli chavisa di'ayin nesach b'chamri. So there was this mixture of the yain nesach, and the question is, what is its status? So let's come to Rav Chisda, Amr shako arbazuzi d'sheb ben harav v'nishrulach. You can take the value, which was 4 zuz, and throw it into the river, in the Yam HaMelech, basically get rid of it, and that would be fine. So therefore, we see that actually the din of the kula, Rabbi Lezer, is not just when it comes to the bread, but also by the chavius. Now Rashi says, we're going to see later on at the end of this Masechta, b'yayin nesach shenafel labor. If you have yain nesach that fell into a pit, kuloi aser b'hana. The whole thing is aser. He says you could actually sell it to idol worshippers, excluding the yain nesach because you can't actually get hana from the wine itself. The hasam tervayu sfirul hu kurabanan. That over there they both hold like the rabbanan. The hacha the in poidel yain nesach. That over here you can't be poidel yain nesach. Umiu ki mazvin le chutzim de yain. Nesach shaboy. So the reason why Rosh Hashanah is lenient over there that you could actually sell the chavius excluding the yain nesach. Lo mishani mi yain nesach midi. You're actually not getting any hana from the yain nesach. Mishum deleisli sur be'ene. Interesting language over here because the isser is actually not be'ein. Okay, ayin. What exactly that chiluk is as we get to the Gemara later on in this Masechta. Okay, so let's finish this up. Let's see the last Mishnah. Says the Masnisan. So Ketzim Mavatla. So how exactly can you be Mavatal in a shera tree, other than obviously destroying and burning it? So the Gemara says the Mishnah says like this: Kirsam v'zirad. Let's say you break the branches off. In that situation, by drying up these branches, and you remove them. The Zarah are the moister branches. So natul mimena makel or sharbit. You can take a stick of some sort. Afil ola harizeh batla. Even if it's branches, it's going to be batal. In other words, basically, if you rip the Avodah Zarah, parts of it off, that obviously shows that you don't show any respect for that Avodah Zarah anymore, and that's how you can be batal. And then the Mishnah says, what if shifa? You smooth it out in order to make wood chips. So with sarka, if you did it for the sake of the Avodah Zarah itself to beautify the tree, obviously asura. Shalotzach mutaras. However, if you did not for the sake of the Avodah Zarah, then it becomes mutter because that's a form of bittul. Okay, says the Gemara. Oisen shifoyin matelen. What exactly are the status of those shavings themselves? So what is says Rashi shiflut sarkav lo batla. So it says shafan mi batili olav. Are those shavings batal? So pligi ba Rav Huna Rav Chia barav chadam rasun v'chadam mutarin. So the shavings is a machlokes what the status is. Tanya commandir mutarin. So actually we have a Bryson support that those shavings are mutter. Desanya. So let's say you have Avodah Zarah and you shaved it off, and you did it for its sake with sarko, for the sake of the Avodah Zarah. So obviously he v'sarfeha mutarin. So in that situation, pardon me, what sarko means you did it for your own purpose. So that's an actual bittul, because you are shaving it off not for the Avodah Zarah. You would not do that if it actually considered this Avodah Zarah tree to be chashiv. So therefore, by you doing so, you're mavatal it, and therefore the tree is mutter, and even its shavings. What's sarka, but let's say you did the shavings for the sake of the Avodah Zarah, he asura, so the tree still remains aser. However, v'shavim mutarin, the shavings themselves are still mutter, or will become mutter. However, if we're dealing with that's an avodas kachavim who does it. A Yisrael who does it, bein l'tzarko, he v'sarfeh asurin. It doesn't make a difference because an avodas kachavim has the ability to mevatel avodah zarah, as opposed to a yid doesn't have the same capacity to do so. Itmar avodas kachavim shenishtabra. So let's say avodah zarah that broke itself. Rabbi Omer tzarich levatel kol kisim v'kisim. You still need to mevatel each and every piece. Even though it broke off, that's not enough, because maybe you still want it that way, right? You still want it as a avodah zarah. So therefore, you have to mevatel each piece. Shmuel Omer avodas kachavim einu batla el derech gedilasa. It cannot be mevatel it except in its normal way. Except in its normal way, says Rashi. Avol zu shenishbara batel atzma. In this situation, since it broke by itself, it's batel by itself. The Meimer Amar, a person would say, Ihi nashilu matzla hu gavra matzle, because a person would say it can't even save itself. It's obviously worthless and has no power. So therefore, according to that shita, it's batel. The adarabba, maybe you think the other way around. Maybe you would think the fact that it broke by itself and no one did it, maybe that wouldn't work. El hachakamer. When it comes to avodah zarah, they do not need to mevatel it except in its normal way. Okay, lema b'hakimim. So maybe this is a machlokas. The marsavar oivdin l'shibarin. The marsavar ain't oivdin l'shibarin. The question is, if it already broke, whether you have to mevatel each piece must be because maybe some people will still worship the broken pieces. Therefore, that's the machlokas. Well, the kuliyam oivdin l'shibarin. Really, people will still worship the broken pieces. So if that's the case, then everyone should hold that tzarich levatel kol kisam v'kisam. These aren't just broken pieces. These are the broken pieces of the broken pieces. The broken pieces, certainly a person would worship. The question is the broken pieces of the broken pieces. The Iboy saying alternatively, a third answer, the Iboy saying the kuliyam shivish matarin. The broken pieces a person would still worship. The broken pieces of the broken pieces a person would not worship. We're talking about a bazaar that was actually in pieces, and it was fastened together as an assembly, like a Lego. And then it broke apart. And we're talking about a hedjit is able to put it back together again. I sound like Humpty Dumpty. Marsavar kivan the hedjit yachal hachzira lobatla. Even though it fell apart, but since any person could just easily put it together, then that's not considered a bittul. Marsavar enavas chachavim batla eredel kedilasa dahainu orche. It's normal way. Halav gidilasa he v'ensirich levatl. This is not the normal way, and therefore it does not need bittul. Okay. Hanulach kol hatzalamim, hanulach kol hatzalamim, hanulach kol hatzalamim. We completed the third parak. We're going to continue tomorrow, the fourth parak. Shmuel Eimer Sholosh Avanim Zu B'tzad Zu. So we're going to learn about different isurim, different type of avodah zarah with rocks and how they're formatted and situated. We'll see that in tomorrow's daf. Okay, let's look at question 4. Avodas kachavim shenishbara. So it broke by itself. So one says you have to be mevatel every piece. Shmuel says avodas kachavim inu batel ender kedilasa. So what exactly is this machlokas? So it says 2. The answer is really 3. Either their machlokas by shivri shvarim. The first one is maybe the machlokas is oivdin mishvarim, or everyone holds that a person is going to worship the pieces. The question is shivri shvarim, the pieces of the pieces. Or with regard to an avodas kachavim shecholiyos, that it was they're all pieced and put together, and a hedjit is able to easily repair it, whether or not that's considered to be a bittul. Question TA1, TA1, good. So avodas kachavim sheshifa avodah zarah madin ha'akum madin hashifoyin. So if the akum himself shaved off the avodah zarah, so if he did it for himself, for the person, so then it's litzarko, sakol mutter, because he was mevatel it. But if it was litzarko, he did it for the tree, so the tree is aser. However, the shavings is a machlokas, whether or not they are aser. Question TB3. A person will not worship pieces. Madu avanim shenishbru mimarkoyos asurois. So then why would the Markolios be Aser? Because apparently that is Shivarim. Let's see if Rashi speaks about this and I missed this. Let's see. He was saying the Komia in Oivdim Mashivi Shivarim. I don't think Rashi says this over here. Let's see. Kuliyam Oivdim Mashivarim Shenishbrin Melein Baha Di Omer Shmuel Bereish Pirkin. Afil Shivri Abbas Chavim Matarim Bahanal Omoitzin Haka Hudolal Chazinon. Okay, I don't think Rashi says anything over here. What did I write? Yimhain Tikru Bas Avodah Zarah Heimasur Yim Asher Zezek Kamo Guf Mishal Avodah Zarah Atzma Shazel Avodasai. Okay, I'm going to have to hopefully see. Perhaps that is not in today's daf. Ad Kan.